Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Marc Guberti, founder of the Content Marketing Plaza, bringing you 3 new episodes each week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. And before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you a quick question. How much would your life change if you could make 6 figures from your content? Imagine being able to quit your 9-to-5 job, do what you love for a living, and spend more time with your family. That's what we help our students do at the Content Marketing Plaza, an 8-week program that will help you build your way to 6 figures via your content. You can learn more about the Plaza by heading over to contentmarketingplaza.com, which will be in the show notes. All right, let's jump right back into the episode. One of the best things you can do to grow your business, and this is it's great for anyone, regardless of your niche, is getting speaking engagements. And speaking engagements can be really useful for generating hot leads. And there are people who they really dive deep into this and open up 6 figures. In some cases, people even open up a new door that leads to an additional $1 million because that's how much they are able to make from their speaking. So there's a lot of potential with speaking. We're going to dive into all of that in this episode with today's guest, who is the no-nonsense, common sense online marketing strategist, speaker, author, product creation specialist, and owner of Power Up for Profits. She helps entrepreneurs make money online, and her clients are driven by making a difference through their own unique voices. Today's guest for episode 302 of the Breakthrough Success podcast is none other than Kathleen Gage. Kathleen, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
You know, Mark, I love your energy, and I love the number 302, and I love the fact that we're here talking, and so it's great to be here. Thank you.
Kathleen, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really looking forward to this episode because speaking is such a lucrative path, and the great thing about it is that anyone can do it. It's not like it doesn't matter if you're a marketer, it doesn't matter what niche you're in. Speaking can be great for you, so we're going to talk about that. Before we do, though, I'm wondering if you can give us some background. So can you just share a little bit with us why you decided to start your business and Power Up for Profits, and just some of the backstory behind that?
Absolutely. And actually, I'm coming up on 25 years of owning my business. And awesome. I can tell you in a 25-year period, a lot has changed. It's not what I envisioned at the beginning. And honestly, I don't even know what I envisioned at the beginning, because I was like a lot of startup entrepreneurs. I had big dreams and very little foundation to move forward on the dreams. But I was in a corporate environment, and I realized that the corporate world just wasn't going to let me use my creative skills the way that I wanted to. So with a dream in my heart and just a little bit of cash in my pocket, I said, okay, I'm starting my own business, and had a lot of lessons to learn over the next 25 years. But it started out as a corporate training company, because leaving a corporate environment, it made sense to go into corporate training, teaching team building, management, sales skills, things of that nature. And I evolved to where I was working with municipalities, state agencies, federal agencies. I worked with the U.S. Marine Corps at one point when I was contracting with a seminar company. I've worked in the career development sector. And over the years, I evolved into working with solo entrepreneurs. That evolved into working with micro businesses and people who wanted to write books. And the skill that I always brought to the experience, and I was able to work with my clients on, was the ability to speak and actually generate incredible revenues from getting on the platform and speaking. And so as I've evolved, my business has evolved. And it's interesting because a lot of times people, they're real resistant to change. And you have to be willing to change with the times, change with the trends, and change with what's in alignment with who you are at any particular time. But also being really clear if that change is just because you have ADHD, which a lot of entrepreneurs do, or if it's a necessary change. So today, I work primarily with conscious business owners, those that with in the pet space quite a bit, animals. I work with associations and manufacturers. I work with companies that are very interested in their employees and staff having good health so that they can perform at the highest level. And I actually am in the process of rolling out what's called the new face of 60, because I'm going to be 65 in just a few months. And with a colleague of mine, the new face of 60 is all about how life can be really vibrant in our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.
Kathleen, a lot of awesome stuff you're doing right now. And I mean, that whole idea of getting on the stage, it's definitely something very important for us to do. And I mean, we could talk about, obviously we're going to go deep into getting those hot leads on the stage, but I think it's first appropriate to talk a little bit of how we actually get on the stages, because for some people, like finding the right people to ask, relationships, things like that may not feel as little clear. So can you give us some clarity on how we can approach getting on the stages?
Absolutely. One of the best ways to get on the stage is to go to events where they have speakers and just kind of notice what the speakers are doing, how they put their talks together, because not only do you have to get on the stage, you have to give a good presentation, but oftentimes networking is one of the best ways, networking at conferences, networking in your local market, and being very clear on who your message is designed for. For example, I recently went 100% plant-based for my health. I did it for health reasons, and the further I go into it, the more I realize there's a whole market of people out there that I could actually do presentations for that are very committed to the plant-based movement. And so for me, it's looking for those blogs, those social media outlets that have people that are interested in plant-based eating, conferences, doing Google searches for other speakers that speak in that genre. And then basically you're going on a treasure hunt. You're looking for places that other speakers within the genre that you're going to speak in, the topic and the expertise, where they've spoken, who the meeting planners are. And then, a lot of people don't want to hear this, but dialing for dollars. Picking up the phone and actually calling to find out, do you hire speakers? Now, there's the level of people who speak for free, which I still do that on occasion. And I've never done a free speech in that I always make money. The biggest payday I made from doing a quote unquote free presentation was $250,000. Wow. And it was a 3-day event. A lot of work went into it. It was my own event, but I did a self-staged event where I had 100 people in the room, and I converted a few of those people into a year-long coaching program. Had they not seen me for 3 days, the enrollment into my program would not have been at the level that it was. Just this week, I've signed $20,000 worth of business just this week for speaking engagements that I did within the last, one was about a month ago. That was a $2,500 contract, and another one was nearly $18,000 for a speaking engagement that I did about a year or two ago. Now, the big thing is to keep in touch with people. I think this is a lost art where people, they want business, but they're not willing to build those relationships. So it's really about treating the people that you want to do business with enough respect to keep in touch with them. Don't always try to sell them on something, but really create value. The more value that somebody can take and people know that you're a speaker, the more opportunity you're going to create.
And I really want to go a little deeper into your event. I mean, you mentioned 100 attendees, $250,000. So just doing the math in my head right now, it's about $2,500 per attendee on average. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what went into organizing your own event, because I mean, if you could pull that off, that's definitely the easiest way to get on the stage, and how were you able to see that kind of a conversion?
Absolutely. There's smaller events that I've done that are self-staged, and I did one recently in my local market where it was a 3-hour presentation, and I handpicked the people that I invited. I actually targeted companies that had a certain type of staff, a certain number of people, and it was by invitation only. And that one, I'm still working with some people on the possibility of me working with their company. So that's one level. That takes very little work on my part to do that. It's basically going through my database saying, okay, who do I want to invite, going through my stack of cards that you normally get at meetings, reaching out to these people, sending the invitation, doing a follow-up call. So there's a process on that. The event where I did $250,000, what I did is I actually wrote a book in 2013 called Power Up for Profits, The Smart Woman's Guide to Online Marketing. I did a book launch for the book, and anybody who bought the book got 2 tickets to my event, the 3-day event, and they had to put a refundable deposit down. And the reason to put a refundable deposit down was they had skin in the game. They were serious about showing up to the event. And if they didn't show up, then we kept the money because there are administrative costs that go with something like this. And with this particular event, my cost was about $30,000. So it's not like we just made $250,000 and there was no work or no investment involved. There was risk in the whole process. And there was no guarantee that I was going to be able to enroll people in my coaching program. So we had the book launch. People bought the book. They got a couple of tickets to my event. We did follow up with the people who got the tickets, because the thing that I see a lot of people make a mistake on is they drop the ball somewhere in the process. And you have to have a check and balance of, okay, we sold the book. They opted in for the bonuses we're going to give, and they were my bonuses. I didn't get a whole bunch of partners to give bonuses. I've done those kind of campaigns, but got the bonuses. We did a follow-up call. We did another call. We got them to enroll, to go to the event. We did a follow-up call to keep them excited about the event. They showed up to the event. Obviously did a really good job. That's a big part of it. You have to have a lot of confidence on the platform, and confidence comes with experience. It's amazing how many people will stop themselves because they say, oh, I'm not as good as so-and-so. Well, so-and-so got really good by doing it a lot. So they came to the event, and I had already planned out what kind of offer I was going to make. It wasn't something that I just kind of put on the back burner, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll make an offer. I was very clear on the offer that I made. I was very clear on the way that I presented to create value all the way up to making the initial offer. And then on the third day, I made the offer again, and that's how we generated the revenue. Now, the thing about generating the revenue is then I had delivery. It's like you don't just sell something and then you don't give quality delivery. Everything along the way has to be quality, and that can lead into other opportunities. So with my events, even if somebody doesn't sign up for my year-long coaching program, which I don't even offer it anymore, but they may want me to come and speak to their organization to do a keynote presentation or a breakout session. So there's all this hidden business that most people that have the idea of speaking, they leave a lot of money on the table because they don't pursue the leads. For example, if somebody says, oh, I'd love for you to call me because we have an association that you'd be a great fit for, and they put the card in their pocket, and the card sits there, goes through the washing machine, goes through the dryer, and it's no longer any good. The main point being, Mark, is that not only do you have to have good lead-in, you have to deliver a great presentation, you have to have stellar follow-up and stellar delivery.
That's a lot of really interesting stuff. I mean, the follow-up is pretty important. It's interesting you mentioned how, I mean, it's not free to host one of these kinds of events. I mean, you mentioned you put $30,000 into it. I am wondering, though, do you know how we could do it on a shoestring budget? Because, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. You know it's proven you can confidently put down $30,000 or something like that because of your experience. But for someone really trying to host their first event, what guidance do you have?
Well, I'll give you an example of a client of mine who is a feline behaviorist. She works with owners of cats who might have behavior issues. And we put together a plan for her to do an event at her local library. The cost to do the event was minimal because most of it was her sending out emails, calling people. So first of all, she secured the date for the presentation. It was going to be an hour-long presentation on, of all topics, how to get your cat to go potty in the litter box. I mean, I thought, wow, that's an interesting topic. And she said, that's the number one problem that cat owners have is their cat not using the litter box. I said, okay, you know your market. Let's go ahead and use that as a topic. And so she secured the location. She made sure she had plenty of time to do proper promotions. She put a postcard together, went to Fiverr, which is Fiverr.com, got a postcard made for $5 or $10, got the postcards printed from a place called 9-cent color copies. So for about 100 to 200 postcards, it was maybe $25. Then what she did is she went and reached out to clients that she had done business with or people who had expressed an interest. She posted stuff on social media. She posted stuff on her website. She sent out media releases to the local media. Her out-of-pocket cost to put on an event that we thought would bring in 20 or 30 people, 115 people signed up for her event. The out-of-pocket cost for that was about $100. So it was $1 per head for her to get what we call butts in seats. Now, the big key was she did a great presentation. People loved it. They said really informative. Now came the follow-up. And the follow-up is where the gold is. So the gold is in the follow-up. She couldn't sell anything at the event because of the rules of the library. A lot of libraries have a rule that you can't sell anything. What she could do, though, is have a drawing to get everybody's business card and immediately within a week to 10 days, do all the follow-up calls. And this is when I work with my clients, this is an area I really drive home with them. It's like you can't wait 2 or 3 weeks and then decide to do the follow-up. You've got to get people while they are hot leads, because if they liked your presentation, if your presentation solved a problem and you've given a solution and they say, I want to talk to you, I'm interested in your other products and services, you absolutely must follow up. Do not depend on people to call you. And so the end result of that was that she actually had more business than she had had in a long time immediately following this presentation. And now she uses the event model to generate leads to fill her consulting practice.
Wow, that's a really awesome story. I mean, like, to get 115 attendees just for around $100. I mean, that we're talking about a really successful Facebook ad here, but this is like people in face-to-face setting, a lot of time because of presentation time. So, I mean, that's really awesome to see that you could get this kind of result.
Absolutely. And you know, Mark, what's exciting about this is that virtually any industry, any topic, any expertise can be used in presentations. And I see with a lot of people that are in network marketing and MLMs is that they lead with their product rather than leading with value and information. I have another client that wrote a book called Rock and Roll at Any Age. She's 77 years old. She wrote the book when she was 75, and she sells what's called Shackley. It's one of the longest term network marketing companies around. And she wanted to build her client base in a way that is not very traditional. And so she wrote this book, and the book is just by itself is a stellar product. Well, she wrote the book, and then she started doing events in her local market. Not only was she able to sell her book, but she was able to do a presentation on health and fitness, and then on the back end, she would have people fill out an evaluation form and ask, would you like to talk to me about one-on-one consulting? Would you like to find out about business opportunities with Shackley? Whenever she would follow up, that's when she started making more money. And again, it always goes back to the follow-up. And for some reason, people are scared to death of the phone. It's like they're afraid of interviews and they're afraid of the phone. And it's like, no, those are the two things that are your best friend. But and the thing that people really need to keep in mind is you have to have a talk that solves a problem. It's not just that your mom and dad told you you're a good presenter or you present good at the church. That's all very fine. But what is the problem that you are going to provide a solution for? And don't try to solve all the world's problems in one hour presentation or one day or even a 3-day presentation. You want to give really good content, but you also want to leave the opportunity that if you have other products and services that people can invest in, that you're going to create that opportunity for them and let them know that you do have these products and services.
And that's a really interesting point because we can't solve every single problem in 1 hour, but if we really get clear on which ones we do want to solve and we could really focus on those, that's what can really allow us to differentiate ourselves. So instead of like a how do I grow my business, maybe it's how do I grow my coaching business? How do I get more sales for my book? How do I build my network? So there are very specific problems that we should be tackling instead of just these overarching things that you can't do in an hour. So that's a really great point by Kathleen. We're going to get really deep very soon on the actually selling on the stage and making money, because I know we've covered that a little bit, but that is definitely an important point. Can you share a little bit with us what you believe the differences are between like getting on a stage like in a local library or any physical place like that versus a telesummit or virtual summit?
Well, that's a real good question, Mark. And I think the greatest distinction is that when you're on the stage in front of people, you can actually see their response real time. Where even though with a webinar, if you're doing it by Zoom or some other platform that allows you to see the people, it's not the same. Now, I'm a real proponent of teleseminars and webinars because I've done quite well in that arena also. But I remember the first time I did a teleseminar, after being on the stage quite a bit, it was so awkward to me, and I was out of my comfort zone because I couldn't see people's responses. And so one of the things that you want to make sure of is when you're doing a teleseminar and webinar is to have energy. You would have no problem with that at all, with that introduction. It's like, oh my gosh, this guy is off the charts with energy. And you have to have energy, and you also have to give people time to digest the information. So that would be the major distinction, is you're not seeing people's responses real time. And for some reason, when people are on teleseminars and webinars, the audience members, even though they might have a question, they have this fear factor come up about asking the question because they might think it's a dumb question. They don't want to be the center of attention, and they're waiting for somebody else to ask. So you have to be prepared that if nobody asks questions and you've opened it up to Q&A, you have to be prepared with some questions to say, well, here's one of our most common questions. The thing with being on the platform, if you're not real comfortable at this point in time, the one thing that will get you really comfortable is experience. Another thing is join a Toastmasters group, because you can get some very practical training by being a part of what they call a club, and you go week after week after week and just discipline yourself to commit to a certain period of time and get really good at your speaking. Another thing, depending on the level of speaking that you're going to be doing, is get a coach. I was actually just thinking this morning how much I've invested over the last probably 10 years in different coaches and mentors, and it's a substantial amount of money. There was one I invested over $100,000 in her coaching. And the thing for people to keep in mind when I give these kind of numbers, I didn't start out making those kind of investments. I grew into it, but I also know that it was the times that my palms were sweating the most that was probably when I needed to make the investment. Oftentimes people, they want to stay in their little safety zone and their comfort zone, and they say, oh, I really don't want to make that kind of investment. But then when you look at where they're having money leaks, they should tighten up those money leaks and hire a good coach for whatever they want to get really good at.
Yeah, I definitely agree about that point with the coaching, because I read a lot of books, and I've heard people say, like, people who are making like 7 figures, that they're spending 6 figures a year on coaching. I don't think that's a coincidence at all, because coaches, like, they keep you accountable. They give you advice that you wouldn't have come up with on your own, or it would have shave off years from the journey. So there's a lot of benefits to having a coach. Definitely something that I wanted to mention while I have this opportunity. And right now, like, we've talked about getting on stages. We've talked about even creating our own event, which if you organize the event, you're on the stage. But how can we sell on the stage? You mentioned putting the business cards in for a raffle if you can't sell like in a library, but how can we use the presentation to warm the audience up to turning into buyers?
That is another really good question. And the shorter the presentation, the smaller the sale usually is. And what I mean by that is if you're going to do an hour presentation, you're probably not going to sell a $25,000 or $30,000 consulting package. However, and usually in that environment, you won't sell a consulting package, you'll sell a coaching program. But if you're doing an hour presentation, oftentimes a book, if you have books, you can sell back of the room. Maybe you sell $100 or a $200 program. And if you're doing a full day, then you might go into a $500 to $1,000 level. If you're doing a 3-day, that's where you build up the process of making the offer. And the way you do that is you actually tell stories that align with whatever your offer is going to be. You talk about clients you've worked with, you talk about results, you give social proof. So the big part of selling is making sure that you've connected the offer you're going to make with what you've talked about in your presentation. For example, in an hour-long presentation, if you're going to sell a book, one of the best things you can do is have a display table at the front on the stage with your book and then maybe a vase of flowers, some decorations. And this would be more for a female audience, but men tend to like it too, because what you're doing is you're already getting people used to the fact that they're seeing the book. Then at one point during your presentation, you can make a point. I have a client that wrote a book called The Food Codes, and it's all about intuitive eating. And maybe Lana's going to share a story about how she works with her clients on really tuning into what's good for their body. And she can say, well, let me share a story with you out of my book. She picks up the book, casually walks to the front of the stage, and make sure that the cover is facing the audience, reads a paragraph or two out of the book and says, now there's more stories like that in my book, and then she goes and casually sets it down. What she's done is made it a very seamless process of, let me introduce you to my book. I feel very comfortable with it. So it takes practice. The thing that I've seen people do is they don't practice at all the offer that they're going to make, and then what they do is they go from one personality to another, and they get really rigid, and they're afraid to ask for the sale, and all of a sudden they're really uncomfortable with what they're doing. The audience picks that up. So you want to really make it a seamless process when you're making an offer. And with the book example, at that point, Lana could say, for those of you who would like to get my book, I'll be signing books at the back of the room. Just see my assistant to purchase the book, and I'll sign your book. Now, the thing you want to look at is, if you got paid to do a presentation, you don't just go up there and start selling. You have that put in the contract. You negotiate it with the meeting planner to see if it's okay for you to make an offer. If it is, great. If it's not, don't ever make that offer, because it's a small community. The meeting planners community is actually very small, although it's very large. So you want to get permission from whomever is your meeting planner. Now, here's another example. A colleague of mine that I'm doing an event with next month, she has another event coming up where they're putting out a call for speakers. They're not paying their speakers. And I said, are you going to let your speakers sell from the platform? She goes, they can buy a vendor table. To me, that's a disconnect for me. I don't want to do that, because I want to be able to show my book from the platform so that it's a very seamless process. Then I could say, and I'll meet you at my table in the vendors area. Does that all make sense, Marc?
Yes. I mean, I really like how you mentioned the call for speakers, because that's something new, because we could get speakers for the events we organize, and also just making sure that, as Kathleen mentioned, making sure that we are okay with making an offer. Like, some organizations may not like that, and you definitely want to stay with the code that they give you. And I'm wondering if we could talk a little more about that. If we organize an event, what's the approach for getting speakers at that event, especially on a shoestring? I know that you mentioned free. Would you just say, hey, I have this event, it's free, like I can't pay any of the speakers, but you can promote on the stage? Is that something you would do?
Well, it depends. It depends who the audience is. It depends if it's in alignment with the market that I work with. So the answer would be yes on some occasions, no on other occasions. If it's somebody who is very experienced in bringing in a good market, I may consider it. In other cases, absolutely not. So I take it case by case, and I do fewer and fewer of those. But one way as a organizer of an event, what the organizer can do is have an arrangement with the speaker that they can sell from the platform, but you as the organizer get 50% of what they sell. They pay their own way in. They sometimes they even pay to be on the platform if it's a big enough event, and these are buyers that are going to be in the audience. So you have to really determine: do you want to be part of a pitch fest? Do you want to be part of an a conference where they're not pitching? It's all based on your own particular goals. But if you're on a shoestring budget and you cannot pay the speakers, but you need to generate revenue, you can make the arrangement that, yes, you can sell from the platform, and we'll even encourage people to buy your products and services, and we get 50%. Now, in some cases, the actual organizer handles all the sales, which, that can be, it can work really well or not, depending on who the organizer is and if they're really organized. But in other cases, it would be that you just give people the platform to speak, and it's up to them after the fact to do the follow-up. And myself, I'm at a level as a speaker that I rarely will take free engagements anymore, because it just doesn't make sense for me to be on the platform with a brand new speaker that is not at the level that I am as a professional speaker. And I don't mean to make that sound arrogant, but I've worked very hard to get where I'm at, and I want to be with a high level caliber of speakers that really make me raise my own bar. So in answer to your question, it's a case by case situation.
That's an interesting analysis, and one of the things that I want Breakthrough Success listeners to get from this is that Kathleen pointed out that she is a great speaker, and I make that point clear because I feel like we're not really good at looking at our self-worth, looking at the things that we've already done and being able to say those things. I mean, right. Kathleen's not doing it in a bragging way at all. She just mentioned it, but I just wanted to bring that out from this episode because I feel like self-worth, I've touched upon it in a few episodes lately, so I definitely wanted to bring it into this episode as well. And with the speaking, going back to that, there are people who they see that public speaking is lucrative. They hear the story about the person making six figures. They just heard your story about making $250,000 from one of your speaking gigs. But what do you believe holds most people back from being able to really launch into lucrative public speaking careers?
Oh, you are asking some great questions, Marc. And I would say the number one thing that holds people back is that voice in their head that tells them they're not good enough. They might forget what they're saying. They might go blank. I've actually gone blank and I've forgotten what I was talking about, and I give it back to the audience. What was I just talking about? And it wasn't like that in the early days. I had a speaking opportunity many, many, many years ago, and I conveniently got laryngitis right before the engagement, and that was my out because I was so frightened. And I had to learn to walk through my own fear. And there's times still when it's a big engagement and it's a new market and it's people that, I might be a little intimidated by. I can feel my fear come up. And what I work on every day, not so much as I used to, but I work on my own comfort zone and getting out of it. And so I think in answer to your question, the thing that holds most people back is their fear. Fear of failure, fear of success. And I see this with clients I work with that we get them podcast opportunities. And I've had a couple of situations recently where I have watched their fear just explode, where they're like, well, I don't know if I want to do that interview. It's like, oh, you're doing the interview because we worked really hard to get you this interview. You know how it is as a host. It's like if somebody books the time, you want to know they're going to show up. And so fear is a very interesting thing, and it shows up in a number of ways. It can show up actually in our body through illness or through an injury where we conveniently injure ourselves so that we don't have to step up to the plate. And now I'm not saying it's always like that, but the reality is if we want to dig really deep and look at the subconscious response that we have to something, it's quite interesting to see what we do or do not do to hold ourselves back.
And you bring up something really interesting with that fear and how, sickness and injury, it's not like we intentionally do these things, or it's not even that we always come up with an excuse that, we get sick or whatever it is. I remember there was a very stressful point in my life where I think I was sick for like 3 straight weeks, like on and off. So even if it's not intentional, it's just something where if you have that fear and it really drains on you, that affects your whole system, and that's why people get really sick when they have those kinds of fears. So you really just gotta have this idea where you're not going to be perfect. You fail your way to success, and it's the same thing even on a big stage, or even when people are watching you. You're going to make mistakes in front of people. You just got to learn.
And it's so interesting because I tend to push myself a lot, and like I said, I'm going to be 65, and I did my first full marathon at the age of 61, did my first sprint triathlon at the age of 64. So I'm probably not your typical 65-year-old. But what I do is I will put myself in environments where I'm very uncomfortable, and it's something that makes me stretch myself. And I can remember the first 5K race I participated in. I actually stood in the corner and I looked at everybody and I thought, they're so much better than I am. They're so much more skilled. And they were. There was no doubt about it. I had never participated. And so what I did is I went and found somebody to just have a conversation with, and we ran together. I was a very slow runner at that time, still a slow runner, but I do it anyway. But I noticed this recently when I participated in a race where I went there and I was saying hi to all my friends, and I was connecting with the coordinator, and I was having a great time. And I thought, wow, I've crossed that invisible line where enough time and enough experience has given me confidence. Where when I first started, I was like a little kid that was like, what was I even thinking? Why am I here? This is really dumb. I don't know why these people do this. Every conversation you can have that is a self-limiting conversation I was having. And now it's like I look at opportunities to join in races because it's a great community of people. We do a lot of fundraising. In just a few days, I'm doing a race where we're actually collecting new socks for homeless people. We're calling it the sock run. So I think that there are plenty of opportunities for us to look at where we either hold ourselves back or we move forward. And if people think that successful people who have a lot of confidence never have fear, they're sadly mistaken.
Yeah, I definitely agree on so many of your points. Successful people, they definitely have that fear going in. They just decide to do it. And some people may say there's some reason that apparently is a good excuse that they're not doing something. So for instance, that you mentioned, a lot of 65-year-olds, they're not thinking about marathons. They're not thinking about running or doing all these things that all of a sudden you started doing very recently. People are not thinking that way. And I feel like if you have this goal that you think, oh, I'm too young to be doing this, because that's more of my angle, right. I disprove, or I'm too old or anything like that. There are people who have had those kinds of challenges before and have overcome. And when it comes to being a lucrative public speaker, it's no different. It's just a question of how much do you believe in yourself and how much time do you want to put in to see this happen.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head with how much time do you want to put in to see it happen. Because one of the things I always encourage people that are going to speak to do is write a book. Because when you write a book, you always have a revenue stream. And even if it's a paid or a non-paid engagement, if you can sell books from the platform, you might make more by selling your books than you would have if they paid you. But I see the fear come up around speaking, where people hold themselves back. I see the fear come up about writing books. It's just so interesting how it shows up. And the thing I always remind the people that I work with, and when I do interviews and I just have the conversations about how do you get through fear, how important is what you do to the people that you do it for. Whatever your message is, how important is that? And people will say, oh, it's so important, it's so important. And I say, then why are you being so selfish to not get out there and play the biggest game you can and put your message out in the biggest way possible? Because I really believe now more than ever, Mark, the world is in a world of hurt. There's a lot of pain going on. There's all the natural disasters. There's, school shootings. There's whatever's going on. And there's a lot of healing that needs to go on. And even if it's somebody who has a cookbook that can teach people how to have family time and it'll bond a family, they need to get their message out. Or maybe it's somebody that's teaching kids how to be entrepreneurs at a very early age. My grandnephew just did a presentation. He's 12 years old, and he had to pitch an idea like he was pitching to the Sharks, that TV program, The Sharks. Yeah. He did phenomenally well. I thought I would have never done that at 12 years old. But his message is so important that he wants to put it out there in a big way. So the thing I always invite people to look at is, how selfish are you being by not learning how to speak, by not writing that book, by not doing everything you need to do to get through the fear? And if fear is not a part of the equation for you, you're probably not playing a big enough game. I had a mentor many years ago who said, if your palms aren't sweating, you're not playing big enough.
That's really awesome. And I mean, like speaking, it's a new thing for some people, so there's going to be some fear in it. It's there. No one ever goes into something new and then all of a sudden becomes a master at it. And there's definitely some fear, especially when you're on that first stage. And I mean, if you want to be a lucrative speaker, as we mentioned, it does come down to the time that you put in, but at the same time, it's important to make sure that you're doing the right things during that time. So I know we covered a lot of ground during this interview, but I'm wondering, Kathleen, if you could also share with us some of the habits that you consider have been essential for your success as a public speaker.
Ooh, wow. Some of the habits, do it and do it a lot. It's like have such a passion around the opportunity to speak that you really give 100%. Treat each speaking engagement as if it's the only one you're ever going to do and give it 100%. Don't minimize the size of the audience. If you've got five people, you give them as much as you would give 500 people. I think that's really important. Surround yourself with people who are better at the skill of speaking than you are. I can't remember who said this. It was either Brian Tracy or one of those guys that's been around forever. The 5 people you surround yourself with the most, you're going to be the average of those people. So if you want to be a great speaker, go hang out with great speakers, which means go to their conferences. It means join their mastermind groups. It means join Toastmasters. It means join the National Speakers Association. And if you're not qualified to join, go to their meetings so that you can hang out with people who are doing this for a living. But the most important part is really respect the privilege of speaking, because it truly is a privilege. Don't become arrogant around it. And trust me, I've had my days where I have gotten arrogant. I think self-care is huge. I'm a real proponent of really honoring the vehicle, the vessel that we've been given. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. It's like, how are you nurturing yourself with food? Are you getting enough rest? Are you, like, before a big presentation, I meditate, I pray, I ask for guidance. These are all things that I learned from other people, and they're ingrained in the way that I do my presentations. But I will not just go on a platform and think that it's going to be me speaking. I'm a channel for whatever message needs to come out at that time. Even before our conversation today, it's like, I know that people are going to hear this. There are going to be people that will hear something that's going to make a huge difference. That wasn't me. That was the information that needed to work through me. But I think a lot of it is really just honoring the opportunity and respecting the position of being an influencer on the platform, regardless of where that platform shows up.
Those are some really awesome habits. I'd also like to double down on the one where you say treat each one like it's your last. And some cases you may only be speaking in front of 10 people. That's how it first starts. You don't say I want to be a public speaker and you automatically get inserted on that stage with 10,000 attendees. So,
right.
If you do good on the small stages where there are not as many people, but you still do your best, you naturally do better on the big stages. It's not like all of a sudden the spotlight's on you and you get this, I don't know, divine inspiration or something like that, where all of a sudden you're really crushing it. You crush it on when no one's watching, and then you crush it on the big stage.
Absolutely. And I think it was Tony Robbins who said, what you do in private, you will be rewarded for in public. And, my goal is to be on platforms where there's 20,000 people in the audience. And I have to earn that right. Like you said, it doesn't just happen. I don't get popped from, the skies and all of a sudden I'm on that stage. It's like I prove myself to deserve that opportunity.
Yeah, I like that Tony Robbins quote. Really captures the message that I was saying, but in definitely fewer words about that private work really being rewarded in public. And one of the, I know we were just recently talking about habits. So one of the habits that I really believe in is learning as much as possible. It's why, one of my life goals, since you mentioned one of yours, I would like to interview at least 10,000 people in my lifetime. So that's a goal that I have for myself. So learning is definitely at the forefront. But with learning in mind, I know you've mentioned your book, Power Up for Profits. I know you mentioned some other books as well, but what do you believe are 3 books that will have a positive impact on us?
The book that really changed my life is called Magic of Believing. The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol is the author, and it was written in 1930 or 1940. And it's all about our thought processes and how our thoughts either move us forward or hold us back. Another one is Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl wrote that, and he was a prisoner of war not a prisoner of war. He was actually in Auschwitz, and he was one of the few surviving people. And it was all about, they can take everything from me, but they can't take my spirit. And phenomenal, easy read, phenomenal book. And one that I recently read that has literally changed my life. It changed the direction of what I was doing nutritionally is Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And it's all about how we can really heal ourselves through the foods that we eat and live a very vibrant life by the foods we eat.
Kathleen, thank you so much for sharing those book recommendations. Those will all be in the show notes, marcguberti.com/E302. We'll also throw in content marketing secrets in there for anyone who wants to get more traffic, grow their revenue, all that fun stuff with the content brand is all in that book, so that will be in the show notes as well. And before we wrap up this episode, Kathleen, I've asked you a bunch of questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Ooh, wow. I would say the number one question is, how can I serve?
Awesome.
Very simple.
That's basically what we've been talking about the whole time. I mean, whether it's serving through getting on someone else's stage in their event or creating your own event, how can I serve really drives home a lot of the messages we've been covering. So that's definitely a great question for us to think about, along with all the insights that you've shared. So it's been really awesome to have you on the show. For anyone who wants to learn more about Kathleen, make sure you get your copy of Power Up for Profits. All of that info will be in the show notes. But Kathleen, before we wrap up, are there any other places you want us to go to find us? Find you?
They can go to my website, powerupforprofits.com. And if anybody's interested in learning about my journey with plant-based eating, I'd go to plantbasedeatingforhealth.com. It's kind of a new passion for me, but it's a lifelong commitment now. And Marc, I just want to say thank you so much. You're a phenomenal interviewer. I've had a great time, and I appreciate you sharing my message with your market.
Kathleen, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Want to dominate the podcasting industry? Now you can with your free copy of my book, Podcast Domination. You'll learn how to launch, grow, and monetize your very own show. And whether you are a beginner or an expert, this book has a lot of golden nuggets for you. We'll cover the cost of producing this book. All we ask is that you cover the shipping. To get your copy, head over to marcguberti.com/PD.